first remember Cam?
It's really funny when you say that. You know, I remember I was so little. So this is how much of a mum Cam was to me. She used to literally bathe me, right? You know, I remember being like 3-4 years old or something, and I was probably at nursery, and she was like, "Oh, hold on, what's that?" I was like, what is that? And I had chickenpox, and she you know, sort of found this, and then, you know, we were at the doctors and all this kind of thing, and I remember I used to really like Skips, the crisps, and I had a real issue. I still have a bit of an issue with crisps, I must say. And she's like, "Well, you can't eat those because they've got chicken in them." You know, it was her ploy to trying to get me to stop eating, because I used to sneak down to the snack cupboard, you know, the one under the stairs. It was very funny, but I really sort of remember that moment, you know. And
that snack cupboard thing's not stopped. Yeah. You know, even up until, you know, a very late age. You know. You know, the chocolates and biscuits. You know, we have a problem.
we have an issue.
We have a problem. That,
my name's Amrit, and I have a sugar.
You know, if it's a, you know, mum's always stocking like box of chocolates and stuff that, you know, you have to give to people or whatever, or a gift and stuff. And, you know, you'd open a box, he would just be sneaking, he'd eat them and then chuck the rubbish elsewhere so nobody can see them. And there was one, a family friend or someone had come over, and mum pulled out this box, biscuit box.
It was a cardboard box, actually. You know.
Biscuit box to give to this lady.
It was roses.
No, it was a box of biscuits. Amrit goes, "Oh, Mum," or it's one of those where you have the tray.
Yeah.
Amrit goes, "Mum, don't give that." She goes, "Why?" She goes, it's sealed. He goes, "No, but I opened it from the bottom."
I've opened it from the bottom.
And
then filled it with something else to weigh it and make it shake. And then the seal has remained.
Something from a young age.
I got told off that day. But no, it was quite fun. I mean, we had a really very basic childhood, actually, I must say. You know, when I talk to my wife, you know, comparatively, it's a very basic childhood, but we had lots of fun, you know. And
we still like, you know, I remember bank holidays used to be the one day that we'd have off, and Mum and Dad would always take us to some sort. I probably don't remember.
I remember I remember that one, the Windsor. My ice cream fell on the floor, and you know,
when younger than that we used to go to, like, it's always used to be a seaside, whether it's Brighton or Margate and stuff.
I never got any of that. The shops were running.
The shops were running quite often. Yeah, so that didn't happen for you, but I remember that. So there would be that, and on a Sunday was a day that Mum wouldn't go to the markets and stuff. One of us would go. Or one of us, not you. But she would always cook a feast and stuff, and that used to be nice. Yeah. So Sunday used to be nice. You know, always used to expect something different. You know, come home.
So what did your mum cook? That was your all
sorts of Indian unhealthy stuff, but all gorgeous.
Yeah, it was very, very gorgeous, wasn't it? Yeah.
And still.
No, not so much now, but, you know, if my kids ask her to cook something, she'll drop everything and she'll do it. If we ask now, it's now all about the grandkids. She's no longer interested.
Right? You know, it's kind of, but it is quite interesting, isn't it? Like, you sort of think back at that time, and I remember being a child, and you become really nuanced really early doors, and you learn kind of what's okay and what's not, and when you're part of that kind of entrepreneurial family, and they didn't really see it as entrepreneurialism, they just saw it as survival, actually. And I remember I was talking to my wife about this recently, and she's like, I can't hear this stuff upsets me. And I was like, look, you know, when I was a boy, you'd have the letter about sports day or whatever, I just wouldn't give that to my folks, because you just know that if you're asking them to come, they're going to try to come, but that's going to cause so much grief and stuff like that. You know, you just think it's really
trips and stuff. We never give the letters, because, you know, we know we're not going to. It's going to be another burden or whatever. Like, if it's just a small day trip or whatever, but, you know, those like weekend aways around that, we'd never even bother giving them.
It's an interesting piece, isn't it? I mean, and actually, I suppose it changed you as a parent yourself as well, and you do a lot of that. And you think, well, where's the halfway house? But, you know, it is. I think it's very interesting because it shapes you as a person, and a lot of those things make you slightly, I wouldn't say harder, but certainly more resilient, because your expectation is lower, actually. You know, I often laugh with my wife, you know, when going away or whatever, and I really like seeing nice places, but at the same time, I'm like, well, if it's a dive, I'm still okay with that. You know, if that's what we have to do, because you're raised in a way that you don't complain, you get on with it, and either you can fix it or you can't fix it. But in both scenarios, there's no complaint. If you can fix it, you don't need to complain. If you can't fix it, you can't fix it. No need to complain, right? And you just crack on and you move on. And actually, it's a really interesting thing, because in business, it's a really important skill, that, you know, because if you're always looking at, well, what's not right, you know, that unless you're doing something about it and you're looking at it as a feedback perspective on how to improve something, it's a really pointless activity, and all it does is it upsets you. It, you know, creates a glass half empty vibe, and you lose some of that self belief. And
tell me about two things. Did you get paid pocket money?
Oh my gosh, I asked my dad that once.
Simon.
Never again.
Blasphemy.
So I asked my dad, so I just go to the markets, and here and there he'd, you know, give us £5 or whatever, and I'd give it to my mum and she'd put it in her bank account. And this one day I just said to Dad, I said,
shrewd older sister there.
I said, Dad, do I get pocket money? He goes, I'll give you pocket money, but you can pay for your rent, your food, your clothes. I was like, all right, that was the last time I ever asked that question.
Great. How old were you?
Probably about 11 or 12. I never asked that question again. And so when my kids ever say that to me, and I say the same thing to them, I just shut up.
Well, you're almost minus X thousands of pounds, so
and pocket money for Amrit?
Oh, come on. You know, it's absolutely.
The thing is, we'd get what we want. So if we wanted, you know, within reason, we'd get what we want. But we'd always been brought up that, you know, you get a gift at birthdays and Christmas. And but, you know, in between, obviously, if you need stuff, you get it. But otherwise, it's, you know, our parents wouldn't just buy stuff for the sake of it. You know, not one of us. I think I was the only one. I don't think anyone else had ever gone into a shop and said, I want this, and, you know, I'm not going to leave until. Apparently, I had done this when I was younger.
Spoiled
there was
children.
This little chair, which we still had until recently, little plastic chair, and I'd gone and sat on it, and I said to Mum and Dad that I want this, and apparently I was screaming and shouting in the shop. They did buy it, but that's probably because I probably created a bit of a scene. But we still had it. But I don't think nobody's ever actually done that.
We just weren't, you know. And also, I think it's really interesting because it raises children that don't want. You know, it's a really hard thing to do. I try to do that with my own children, but to try and sort of make sure that they feel gratitude for the things that they do have, and actually the importance is on different things. It's on relationships and time spent, and you know, all of that, rather than the stuff. Because actually, yeah, it's great. You know, you get the nice stuff, the car, the house, or watch, and whatever. But once you've got it, you realise that it's kind of empty, right? And so. It's really interesting. I think often I think about this when I'm thinking about business and thinking about why. And, you know, when you're in your early 20s or teenage or whatever, your why is, I want that new shoes, kicks, or whatever it is. But actually, as you get older, I mean, my why is very much about, well, how does this operate as a tool for me to spend more time with my children, my wife? You know, as a result of being self-employed, now I can basically get to every bath time, or, you know, to do all of the stuff, you know, go to the Christmas carol, you know, really rubbish singing that the kids are performing and all, you know, I can do all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, being self-employed has been a tool to be able to do that. And part of it is all the stuff that I kind of missed out on. You know, my wife's always like, well, why are you so kind of eager to get to freaking everything? I think I'm possibly the only dad that's been to all of the chaperoned all the school trips, and it's you know, you take a day out and you do it, because I'm like, there's only so many years they're going to care about this. I did it with Manraj, Cam's eldest, as well. We went to the it was what was it, the something about Vikings or something, I think it was, or the Romans, one of the two, and it was this whole day that we did. It was wonderful, and he still remembers it now, and it was just really nice. You know, calling me Mr. D, they thought I was a teacher, and you know, it's a really lovely thing. I think really that for me is where the importance should be, you know, with families. And it's a really interesting thing with me and Cam as well, you know, going through building businesses together. We've been through multiple incarnations now, really, and it's brutal, right? But you need to have that same view, trust, and end goal as well on what's important to you.
So what works well for you both, like working together?
We had a rocky start, I think.
I think it's taken
Tell me more about the rocky start.
Well, it's just. You know, Amrit, I I think just understanding our boundaries
Yeah.
and, you know, respecting how each one might may be feeling at the time. And I
I
think,
think that's
just-
very much directed at me, really. So
I think it was that
it
way.
was really a one-way, respect my boundaries, Amrit.
I think initially when we started working Amrit, I think a lot of the time when things got too much, because, you know, when we're starting out in shore care, you know,
Yeah.
it was quite stressful, and you know, he would treat me like his sister, so he could take his frustration out of me, but he couldn't do that with anybody else. Then obviously I understood that, but sometimes that would upset me, so I would then, when he was okay, I'd go back and say, well, I didn't like that or whatever. So I think we've learned.
So it's really interesting, isn't it? Because what you learn is all of that disc profiling stuff. So though me and Cam work really well together, we're very different personalities, and the way that we want to be communicated with is really different. And so, you know, with me, you know, if Cam or someone is super short and gives me 3 bullet points, great. Cam needs the
Is this right, Cam?
and so you know, and then you get into that kind of whole frustration piece. And I actually needed to do a lot of work around that, because I was like, God, you know, I can't. I know what, now I've got another member of staff. You know, I'm like, this. You know, but actually, and it took years, I think, for us to get this really nice rhythm of saying, well, okay, this is okay, that's not. This is going to wind her up, that won't, and vice versa. And also, it's then saying, initially we were working all the time. So any moment that we live near each other, we work together, we drive to work together, you know, we'd see each other on a weekend, you know, in the evenings. And so it's always work. And then, you know, we sort of came to this realization that this is mad. We didn't come to this realization, it's a lie, actually. You know, our spouses were like, can you please just stop? This is ridiculous. And our sisters were like, we don't want to hang out with you guys anymore.
No work talk. That's what we
Just
usually
no work
get. No
talk.
walk talk. Obviously now we've got to a bit where we don't need to do work talk,
yeah.
and we can, you know, when we're in
But
a
even
family,
then, we balanced it, right? And we were then, okay, if we need to do work stuff, it will be, here's the 20-minute segment, we're going to go into a different place, we're going to talk about it. And outside of that, we're just not going to talk about it, which is super hard, because when I started moving all the reins over to Cam, we'd be both of us at a family event, her phone's going off, I can see there is an issue, I'm like, I'm not going to get involved, just let her deal with it. And it was very interesting to go through that journey, really, when you can see. It's one thing passing something to a member of staff and you're not there on the weekend, you don't know until Monday. It's nothing seeing it over there right now and saying, I'll ask you on Monday morning what's going on, you know.